Here we go. We're going to roll into what we're calling a breakout podcast. That's what I'm calling it. I don't know about you, Nate, but we're going to call it a breakout podcast session. No Jerry, no Jim, no Ryan, no distractions, no racers. We're just going to have a candid discussion. Is candid a good word?
Yeah, candid's good.
We brought Chris back, Chris Graner, who is I don't know if you're in charge of our streaming, maybe the platform. I don't know. You're responsible for much of our IMCA TV streaming platform. But we had you on the show a couple days ago, wasn't it? I don't know what day.
Last week now,
yeah. And we started to talk a little bit. We went down the streaming path. That's the word you like to use, path. We went down the streaming path, and I think it's a good subject for us to kind of to break away from normal podcast subjects like disqualifications and boxes of bad ideas and some of the other things that we're doing for fun or out of seriousness, and just talk streaming for a little while, because I think it's a subject that us as a sanction at IMCA have dealt with more and more and more as the years have went, and like we talked in the previous podcast, you've been doing it for about 10 years now, maybe?
Oh, more than that, since 2010 now. It always seems like 10 years, but
12 years, 13 years, but I think our first
Super Nationals broadcast.
Yeah, Super Nationals broadcast was about 2012, if I remember correctly.
Yep, that was the first one that was done live.
Yep. And, so for us as a sanction, the dynamics have changed quite a bit, and streaming has opened up a lot of opportunities for us. And when I say opportunities, it's not just for IMCA as the sanction, it's for those who are involved in IMCA in any capacity, whether that be promoters who are hosting the events, racers who are obviously competing at the events, and even things like sponsors, and how we bring our sponsorship programs, or how racetracks bring their sponsorship programs into the fold from a streaming standpoint, and then ultimately the race fan. For us as a sanction, we have focused for so long. Our goal has been race car rules, riding race car rules, staying within our niche, our wheelhouse, so to speak, on what our goal is as a sanction, and that is primarily towards rules, regulations, procedures, points, things like that are very primarily driven around promoters and racers, and not fans as much. We've always kind of let the promoters of the event be the people who are soliciting their events to the race fan. So we try to be a part of that, but it seems to me like streaming has somewhat pushed us a little bit more to the forefront as a sanction on what we can do to help our racetracks. And so here we are, 10 years, 12 years later.
Right. And part of that was, you've always stated that your value proposition from a sanction perspective, when you communicate it to me or communicate it to others, is you want to make sure that the promoter is able to be as successful as possible. I mean, and that's why you say, oh, well, we work on specific rules and other things. While many may think that that's, at its core, something you're trying to dictate to drivers, it's ultimately so that the promoter can be successful at running a business.
Correct.
So then streaming comes in and it becomes a component. And while 12, 13 years seems like a long time, it's really about enough time to start doing the hard stuff. And that's sort of what we're coming to now, is we're getting into now we understand sort of how it works at the local level. We've iterated through a few times. We're really good at this core product. I always talk about this core product when everybody thinks about what we do at the streaming level. And that core product is from the national anthem, maybe a little bit before, right? Hot laps. We're going to show some hot laps in qualifying, to the last checkered flag. And if you were to compare that and you think about it relative to other major sports like an NFL or an NBA, we're doing a pretty good job, but it's really mostly a convenience product that over years we've improved. and this isn't just us. We add timing and scoring and replays and more cameras, and the fans have seen that, and the promoters have seen that. But that's taken some iteration. But what's become more prevalent recently is we're all starting to think about what more can we do with the content. But currently, we're still in this spot of at its core, we're delivering a convenience product, and that product, because most of it's behind a paywall, it's not necessarily going to assist with growing our market, getting more people through the front gate. But what it will do is it'll make sure that the fans can see it if they can't make it. It'll make sure that the drivers can watch a replay and see how they did in a race, or the crew members, right? So we've got this product sort of down, and we understand that mostly from the platform perspective and the production perspective. What we're doing right now is we're starting to sort through more frequently a better understanding with the promoters. The promoters are really starting to understand and care. And of course, COVID put the pressure cooker on that. Right? We went from, I sort of might stream, I sort of might not, to I need to stream. I need to have the broadcast out there, and I need it as a mechanism for revenue making for many of the promoters. And while that seems like it was forever ago, really just 3 years ago, and we're just now sort of recovering from everybody frantically trying to figure out how to do online ticketing, how to do COVID tests, how to do all this other stuff that we had to mess with for 2 years. And we're finally starting to relax and start to go back to, okay, how do we understand this thing that we're doing in terms of streaming and make it work for us? And everybody has a perspective. So it's key to sort of think about those perspectives when we're talking about this as well in the framework of our marketplace. We're not at the NFL. We're not the NBA. We're not even NASCAR
or Netflix
especially Netflix.
You go back again to the first year we streamed the event live, and I'm pretty sure we didn't have the staff or the equipment that we had last year at the 40th annual event. And, I just look at how the streaming has evolved for us as a sanction, particularly at the Super Nationals, and the importance it is played for the event in so many different ways. And we could talk about this could go in so many different ways on a conversation, whether it's how it impacts the fans, how it impacts the event itself, the participation from a fan standpoint, the people who stay home and watch the stream versus coming in. Why do they do that? The convenience factor you
right.
just mentioned. But you bring in variables like weather, if it's cold or too hot or rainy or mist. We've run the gamut in all of those conditions, to be quite honest, while the streaming has went on the last 10 or 12 years. And so we see how the streaming does impact those situations, in addition to just perfect weather. You know right. what I mean? And how many people say, I don't care how nice it is, I don't care what the setting is, I don't care who the racers are that are there, I'm staying home and watching it.
Right, and that is that convenience element. And back, we've got this list here of how this market sort of functions from the different perspectives. And you've got this promoter-fan trade-off, right? That the front gate trade-off that happens and is talked about very much at the trade shows. How many people are staying home? I don't think anybody has done a full, respectable statistical analysis on how many people stay home. I try to just go back to my father's general statement on these things. It's common sense, right? If there's a scenario where it's cold and you can conveniently stay home and watch something, that's most likely what you're going to do. Or you've already purchased it, right? You already have access and you're just tired, right? It's easy to kick your feet up. And I'm not trying to say that in a way that steers away promoters. I think that you just need to make sure that all of the economic elements that are in play are understood, and everybody feels like it's a fair balance of what's happening. And there's marketplaces within our own marketplace, right?
Right. Lots of times you hear the racetrack promoters say, "Well, my fans are going to stay home if they can watch. If they don't have to come, they're going to stay home." And I get that. We get that. That makes sense within reason.
Right.
But look at the Super Nationals as an example, and I think this applies to at any level, at any racetrack, in any division across the country. You're going to have some people that, regardless of how close they are to the racetrack, they're not going to go.
Right.
Not everybody's grandparents can come. Not all their family members can come. Not all their sponsors can come.
Right.
We know this because if that were the case, in some instances, if you got a racetrack that's got 100 race cars, for example, at the event, and there's not 1,000 people, let's just say hypothetically, in the grandstands, then you could conclude that every racer is not bringing 10 people with them.
Correct.
And so it doesn't take, like you said, there's some common sense that prevails in some of these assessments and how we're looking at it. But, so yeah, there are situations where people are going to stay home if they live in town. I know people here right in Vinton that watch from their house in Vinton while the races are going on out at the fairgrounds. Right. I know it for a fact. We see, obviously, who those people are through the way that you process the data for us. So we're able to analyze some of that stuff, but at the same time, the person who lives in, let's just say, Bakersfield, California, that's watching the Sunday night races at Benton County Speedway here in town isn't going to be here.
No.
So you've got, it's kind of a trade-off. You've got the local people you may lose because of the stream, but you also are, the intent, I think, and from the onset has been, is how can we capture the ones that aren't necessarily going to be here regardless.
Right.
To me, that's extra revenue for the racetrack, which is always a good thing.
And there's just the factor of how we all operate on a regular basis as human beings when we interact with the entertainment things we love. And what you ultimately are looking for is to maintain some sort of pattern in their lives. That's my own opinion, at least, and I think that was part of what made NASCAR successful. And if you wanted to point at something that I've always thought, well, that was ridiculous. Sunday, whichever time zone you were on, I was typically on, at that point in time in my life, on the Eastern time zone. So it was 1 p.m., right? That you watch NASCAR Sunday at 1 p.m. And sort of the same thing speaks of local racing. If it's Boone Speedway and you know that they're going to fire off at 6 p.m. on every Saturday, if you can't make it, you want them to have the continuity of the fan to be able to watch, because then you stay part of their lifestyle. So I think that that's a very important aspect within our industry of what we have and our fan bases, that you maintain that sort of connection. So maintaining connection with the fan is a very important part of streaming. Maybe the most important thing that we have actually extracted value from thus far, because and you and I have talked about this, and this is an opportunity. What we haven't yet really scratched the surface on, and I'd like for and everybody who's trying to solve this, is how do we make this thing actually get more people to the racetrack? And that's the part that none of us really know yet. I mean, we try like hell to do a lot on social media, and everybody does. So that's a great, additional value that comes out of this stuff. And when I think back to 2010, 2011, 2012, and my concepts for where I wanted this thing to go that I was a part of, I wanted to add more media and media professionals, however you want to qualify professional, to what we do. We've done that, right? There's a lot more people with cameras now at racetracks, and there's a lot of that happening. There's a lot more exposure through social media. But what we sort of still haven't solved this problem of how do we create this new fan? And I think that that's the new thing coming for us that we're going to attempt to solve.
We see it. We see, and we get the comments made to us. I watched it online, or I watched the Super Nationals online, so I wanted to come to the event and experience it in person.
Right.
We've had many people say that to us. So there's no doubt that the streaming has opened us up to people who would maybe have never have actually seen the Super Nationals racing in person, because they didn't. I don't know if someone may not have known about it. It's just not in their area. It's too far away. I mean, there's all kinds of things.
But the core set of IMCA fans, and so you're operating within those. So this is a great way to reach that core set of IMCA fans, right? That whether it be Bakersfield or
for sure,
whether it be let's take Florida for example. I would imagine after what happened there with Peyton Taylor and the clash, that we're not going to be able to necessarily dial it up, but if we were to eke it out and look at some of the data of the people who showed up at the track at Super Nationals, we're going to have some more people show up from Florida this year. And the reason being is that they're just exposed more to it, right?
Sure.
And they're already fans. They're motorsports fans that already exist, and they're down in at those two tracks at either Southern or Northwest Florida. Is that right? Northwest Florida. Those two racetracks. I think that exposure to this increases the likelihood that they would show up at the Super Nationals. What I was speaking more to is we have these race fans at our racetrack. I want to know how to get the guy who's, in town in Vinton, never been to the race, to go to the racetrack. That's our next foray.
I think every type of sport, every sporting venue in the country is trying to figure that out.
Right.
And I don't know if there's a really good answer to that.
There isn't.
I think if you had that answer, you'd be probably not sitting here if you were.
But no, this is, part of the reason I'm here for 2 weeks is for us to do strategy. And it's, you think about the context of what we're doing in our discussions. We want Garrett to be able to do social media. And while it may seem that it's all a play just in general for our audience that we already have, it's the sort of thing that we might get lucky with and pick up some momentum and attract some new people to motorsports. That's the magic of social media, as long as you master the execution, or not master, but at least have some success there. It shows up for somebody who's in Des Moines, and they go, what is this thing going on in Boone, Iowa that they're talking about? And you get a share here or there, and suddenly you might have a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, this conversation could go all kinds of different directions about getting fans there. What is the recipe, the formula, or the key, or what marketing plan is the best? Is it the streaming or is it the TikTok? What is it that's doing some of that? Because you see in other entertainments, opportunities for people, other sports besides auto racing, where you wonder, okay, how are they doing it? And some within racing that are doing it that's like, oh, maybe we should do it like that. I mean, I don't know if there's lots of I guess there's lots of people who think they have the answer to those solutions, but I'm not sure if anybody really.
Oh, and that's really my point, is that we're at that point now where we've got a group of media folks out there. We understand the core product now. We understand it fairly well. We understand most of the mechanisms, how it works. And what's the next place for us to go with this? Are we stuck at a core product and that's what we have, and we try to make the fans happy that we have, and we keep on going? I like to be an entrepreneur, or at least try to be on occasion. And I think about when I was younger, and everybody talks about this, right? I think about when I was younger and the grandstands were full when I went to the racetrack with my dad, right? And those are my context of, so where can we get back to that? Can we improve those situations, or no, we have what we have? I don't know.
Yeah, neither do I. Obviously, the I don't know how. It's very challenging, I think, if the person has no interest in auto racing whatsoever, to convert them into an auto racing enthusiast. I think that streaming, if anything's going to do it, probably has the best opportunity to at least expose people to it. Better so, I think, at times than some of the venues, because you can, you can consume it in bits and pieces. You can, there's different.
But very few people, and I've had this discussion before, we're all behind paywalls for the most part, other than our social media exposure. A new fan, or a possible new fan, is not going to experience motorsports for the first time by paying for it. They're going to experience it through social media first as an opportunity.
Sure.
It's just, are you going to go and pay for something that you've never seen before and you don't understand? Back to the common sense.
Probably not.
I don't think you are. No. So that becomes integral, that we're doing the social media, because that's actually our touching point of reaching a new fan. And it comes up, Nate, I don't know why I thought about this as a good discussion. I was eating dinner last night at his house, and one of our buddies, Tommy Mason, had given Cohen, Nate's son, a Bigfoot monster truck. I guess they were out in Kokopah, and he gave him that. And Tommy Mason loves Bigfoot like crazy. And so we got down the discussion of, all the licensing and everything, and it was Bigfoot still around. And I think he is still showing up a little bit, but what happened in that environment, in that specific motorsport, and that's more entertainment, less motorsport than what we're accustomed to. They split off from Feld. Hot Wheels started their own thing. And one of the interesting things is I haven't been paying attention that much to it. And so I dialed up searching YouTube, right, to see what was going on as I'm having, a little discussion and having a Bigfoot rolled over my legs by Cohen. And I figured out, well, they've actually launched an entirely new deal. They have a huge presence on YouTube. They have a show now. It's being constructed quite a bit different than the Feld stuff. And it looks like they're gaining some popularity. I could be wrong, but just as an example of here's something motorsports related, and it's finding some success. Obviously, Mattel has a little bit of money. They're able to do these things.
Some recognition. People know what Hot Wheels are.
Right. But they've created all these new characters that are the monster trucks effectively, and they're going head to head with Feld. And from what I could tell in the videos, I don't think they're going to show ones that don't have people in the grandstands, but there were a good number of people showing up at these arenas. And it's a touch point to the kid. And that's why I always relate back to my most enjoyable time in motorsports was obviously when I wasn't working on it, because it takes so much time, was when I was attending these events with my dad. And so how are we solving that thing again, back to this market, this thing, how are we making it approachable? I think that the solution is somewhere in there, back to finding a way to reach new people. One of them is get them when they're young.
Sure. That seems to be every sport, to be honest. We get that question quite a bit asked at IMCA is, why don't you have a kids division, kids, so to speak, and, obviously ours are 14 and above age-wise, which many years ago wasn't even that. We went down to 14 and even 13 to a certain extent with divisions like the one shown on behind you with the Sport Compacts in particular, with trying to get younger racers into the sport, exposed to it at a level they can afford. And then they progress through the ranks, whatever it may be, whatever division that they may stay in Sport Compacts forever. But they may end up being sprint car racers or even be, NASCAR Cup racers, who's to say. But, the fan to me is a little bit more, it's a little bit more from my perspective and our perspective at IMCA. It's a little bit more out of what our goal has been, what our focus as an association has been, and that's been the racer, not the fan. So the streaming is just really somewhat pushed IMCA a little bit out of our comfort zone on what we are expected to do as a sanction, because we see it all the time too, where promoters seem more and more wanting to have the sanction do some of the promotional event promotions for them, and that's challenging. You not only are we trying to bring the race cars, now we're trying to bring the race fans too. So
right, where it feels more like it's a franchise model,
a little bit, yeah,
from a top to bottom of here's a turnkey IMCA racetrack, right?
Yeah,
you're just going to slap the branding on it and go. And we get a lot of those requests, obviously, and Nate and I do, to assist. And most of that comes from just the knowledge base of what needs to be executed based on the promoter's knowledge base as well, right? Most of our promoters out there don't live in the world of media other than dealing with their social media, answering comments and questions about the last race. Some of them are good, some of them are great, some of them are just okay, and some of them just don't want anything to do with it. So we come in as having a knowledge base. Of course, I think that's going to be what they're going to do. They're going to look to that for a resource, and I think we generally like to do that. It's what we want to do. It's just a time factor. It becomes edited video. Getting recaps, getting all those things online are I think vital in the long run to the success for these local businesses, because it is exposure. If somebody goes onto Facebook and there's a video and they're in this, the algorithms show you in and around Vinton that there's a race going on, that's a good thing, right? It's promotion, it's advertising. Yeah. It's the modern day radio. It's the modern day TV. It's there for you. It's just trickier because you don't necessarily know how it's going to function. We sort of went down a different path, which I sort of thought we'd end up doing that too. So,
yeah, you gave me the agenda, and I don't think you reluctantly gave me the agenda. You didn't want me to have it because you wanted me to wander a little bit, maybe. And yeah. I'm good at wandering, but yeah, we're in a direction that I didn't really anticipate, to be quite honest. But the conversations, to me, the very popular questions that the platform gets, that we even get here at IMCA, are they're the promoter-based questions, the business-based questions, revenue, what's it pay the racetrack, all these kinds of streaming back-end business questions are always interesting for us to discuss. Obviously we have these conversations with promoters. You have them with them all the time. I have them with them occasionally. But then you get into pricing, ticket price.
I think that's the most important. And I should have just listed it right here. Why doesn't IMCA TV have a subscription?
Right.
That's the biggest one we get. And I haven't done the hard math, but I just done the back of the envelope math. I think as an overall revenue model, if we were to have a subscription, we would generate more revenue. That doesn't necessarily mean we would be able to maintain the other value perspectives for IMCA, which is making sure that the promoter is happy and making sure that
Correct.
Everybody's being treated fairly, and that our job isn't, and this is one of the interesting things from my perspective, because I wear a lot of hats and I work with a lot of different groups, right? I assist the folks at Hunt the Front, I assist the folks at Midwest Tour, I assist the folks at SRL and Spears Racing, when we get to that sort of stuff, and go down the list, Demolition Derby, Truck and Tractor Pull, there's a whole bunch of these folks, and everybody has varying perspectives.
Yep.
And I have to balance out those, whose hat I'm wearing for that day, and what their value proposition is. And IMCA, being one of our largest clients with Speed Sport and Riivet, I wear your hat a lot. And I have to answer that question a lot, which is, we are not just trying to maximize the amount of money that's going through the streaming service. And that's mainly because we don't want to do it to the detriment of the local promoter or the understanding of what's going on.
We've had this conversation behind obviously in private conversations behind closed doors about streaming revenue and what's the goal. And the goal here has never been, hey, we're trying to make a bunch of money off streaming at IMCA. From the onset, we've discussed, okay, what are our options and how people can essentially pay for this stuff? What are they? And one of the things I really liked that you were offering was some flexibility in that. We could do a monthly subscription if we wanted to for all of IMCA racing. We could do a pay-per-view model for every event in IMCA. We could do, even at the track level, the track could do a membership monthly subscription for just there, like Boone Speedway, for example. In most of the conversations that we have with track operators, their concern is the same one as ours is from the onset, and one you've already mentioned a little bit is people are looking for convenience, but I think if you're not careful, you make it too convenient for people not to come to the races. And I think that the sport gets in a very troubling place when it's too easy to stay home and never go to the races. Right. I don't know the exact solution to that. Again, we talk about this a lot, but I do generally think that selling tickets, for example, to any event across the country that is normally priced at $15 or $25 or $35, depending on what it is, from the grandstand admissions to pit admissions, pricing that for, let's just say hypothetically, 10 cents is not in the best interest of the facility. If it was in the best interest of the facility and the racers who need the facility, then why isn't that happening now in the grandstands or in the pits at any event? Why are they not charging a quarter to get in the pits?
Correct.
And 10 cents to get in the grandstands? Because it financially is not feasible for the track operator, because he can't pay the purses. He can't pay his obligations and run his business like he needs to run it in order to fulfill all the obligations. The racers don't want to race for free.
Right. We
don't want racers to race for free. But if we're not careful, we go down that path somewhat, a little bit.
You'll cultivating habits.
Yeah.
If we cultivate the habit of somebody to stay home from Boone Speedway, it's what they do. I mean, habits, that's what happens. So, and it all, you see it with just everybody's just general behavior. Where do you go and grab your coffee in the morning? Where do you decide that you're going to pump gas for your car? All of these things are little itty bitty, small decisions that you make that are related to convenience typically, and convenience is factoring in heavier and heavier to everybody's behavior.
Yep.
So back to the, that problem, if we go down the path of both making it convenient and also don't have a transparent and understood mechanism for monetizing that convenience for the promoter, we could be on a slippery slope rather quickly, because the trade-offs at the racetrack are narrower than a lot of people think. It's not, I'm not sitting here saying I don't want people to watch Boone Speedway and that's why we do it pay-per-view. I would love to let everybody in to watch it. I think it's some of the best racing that I see every year, right? It's amazing stuff. I wish everybody could see it. But if I don't have the economic elements to monetize that properly, even if we were able to have hundreds of thousands of people watching, which I don't think it would be the case. That's the other side we should sort of talk about, is the market understandings about how large we are, and
how a whole nother discussion.
But it's good for people to understand there's nowhere in our market where millions of people are watching anything.
Let's finish the ticket pricing, the stream pricing conversation before we get into what we think the market size really is.
Right.
But I agree with you. You make some very valid points when it comes to all of these subjects. But at the end of the day, you look at, we see promoters do all kinds of interesting promotional things locally. One that I always like to talk about is the free nights, where they have the grandstands for free.
Right.
And everybody, at times you kind of get this feeling like, you see people take the position, well, if you let them in free, you're going to make all that money up on food, or you're going to make all that money up in beer. Well, the problem is, depending on the lease agreement, first off, some of those facilities don't make food money on concessions or beer. Right. So you let people in for free. What do you? I guess the promoter doesn't necessarily benefit from that. But the other thing, I think that even if the promoter does get those vending sales, so to speak, the margins aren't. You have to make such an inflated amount of money on food consumption and alcohol consumption that you can't overcome the 30% margin that you might make on food. You can't overcome the ticket price to where it makes any sense. So you see these events like that, promoted like that, generally speaking in the industry, they kind of come and go. You'll have promoters, at least behind the scenes, say, I tried that once, I'm not doing that again. Yeah. And they don't do it because they don't make no money doing it.
They think of it as a loss leader, right?
Correct.
And that they're going to retain those people.
Yep.
I argued against this pretty heavily, actually. But I would take it, if I were doing this, never promoted a racetrack in my life, so everybody can grill me on that. And I had this discussion, and it was a long fought discussion with our buddy William Scoggins at a recent trade
Lucky
show.
You.
And he wouldn't relent. I was saying I would pay for him to let in everybody who was 16 and under for free for the whole year.
Tracks do that already. Boone does that, or at least it has in the past.
How old?
17, I believe, is what they were doing at one point in time.
Yeah.
I can't speak for him now, so don't hold that to me at Boone.
I think back to now we're having a general psychology discussion.
Right.
I think what you should be doing anytime that you do it based on markets, especially what we deal with in sports, you need to do it every time, because you have to build the frequency, and you have to let them build a habit. free once is free once. It doesn't allow the habit to be built, right? It's a one-shot deal.
Right. There's some promoters that take the position that's, giving something away from free. What's the value of your product if you have to price it at zero?
Right.
What's your product worth if you have to price it at zero in order to get people to do it? So there's that argument as well when it comes to free tickets and low ticket prices and stuff like that. But you get into, for us, I think at this level, and again, I think, and you touched on it a little bit, understanding what our market size is, understanding what the actual true potential is on some of this. I don't think that necessarily that everybody takes that into consideration. I mean, I most promoters don't want to overcharge their fans. They don't want to overcharge their racers. They don't want to overcharge people. But the reality is they have to charge a certain amount in order for it to be
to function.
To be financially viable. So I think that at times there is definitely some criticism of promoters unwarranted from people that don't necessarily understand what the promoters are going through to actually operate the facilities, because they can be very complex. They can be very expensive. There's all kinds of things. Lots of times you hear racers say stuff like, well, diesel prices, as much as it is, and as expensive it is for it to get to the racetrack, we should be paid more. Well, the same should be said about the diesel tractors and water trucks and road graders and equipment going around a racetrack. But there's a fine line there when some of those issues can be passed on to people, and it's
and there are variables that are tough to manage in and out.
Very much.
You can imagine that. I think when you think about high gas prices, who's at the largest risk? It's most likely the promoter, because now we're back to the people who are most likely to not come are the people who are looking at their monthly budgets, right, and saying,
correct,
I'm not going to drive. Whatever that magic number is, and how many miles you're away from the racetrack, you're just eating away at people saying, I'd rather just stay home tonight and save that $40 round trip, which was normally a $20 round trip for people that want to put food on the table.
And when you offer streaming, that's much more convenient at times, weather-based especially, but then even just from a price standpoint, if you price your product for pennies on the dollar, I think you create an issue, a convenience.
There is a potential
for you're changing the habits of how the race fan is consuming.
You're cultivating that habit
Very
over
much
time.
so.
And I think we've seen that, and COVID really did a lot of that too.
Yeah.
It allowed for that habit to really be cultivated.
And again, if we were streaming and we could say that every time we streamed an event, that it's going to produce 100 more people at the next event at that racetrack, if we had data that could actually be substantiated by something like that, that's one thing. But the reality is that doesn't appear. There is no way to do that.
We could dig in, but I think at this point we're still with some of the common sense. Hey, we know that we're not seeing that in the grandstands. Yes. Is there more people that are probably newly attending the Super Nationals? Yeah, but that's still, we're looking at a net effect over time at every event, every race, this isn't just a one-time anecdotal thing that we're trying to measure. And back to, if we could prove that, 100 people showed up, maybe over time we do start to prove that. We're still back to that 13 years. We're 13 in. We're getting more sophisticated, and we think about these things. It's just a matter of, in the back of my mind, I'm figuring out right now, how do I get Crystal Motor Speedway all of their equipment so we can get them started for the year? Right. We have other things that are other current responsibilities that we're taking care of and prioritizing, but we still chip away at this stuff behind the scenes, and we talk analytics and we work on those things. But I want to get to the market size thing because it's important.
We will. The other thing I think is a little interesting too is yes, we have people come to the Super Nationals because they watch the stream and they've never been there and they want to see it firsthand, and they see the catwalks and they see everything, but at the end of the day, when the stream pulls a race fan like that into an event or a facility that maybe because of it, it puts that responsibility then on the facility, the venue, the event.
Correct.
To at least deliver because they're there. You know what I mean? Why would a race fan want to do that? And why would they want to come back?
Right.
And I think that at times, and I use Super Nationals a lot because it's just, I'm on the back end of that deal a lot. So how can we reasonably expect people to sit in grandstands and watch racing for 8 hours in any grandstands, let alone Boone Speedway's grandstands? It's not like it's brand new seat backs. It's not like it's the theater seats you can go to. Look at what there's all kinds of examples of where people are trying to improve this experience. And if facilities aren't doing that, and many of them aren't because they can't afford to,
right.
It's a
And we talk a lot about that. And for all those people out there who are always saying, oh, why can't we have this different experience at Boone? It's good for them to know you and I are battling about how to figure out how to put a nice tent there that has a VIP all the time. And we're thinking about those things, but it's tough to execute these things reliably. Boone's its own special beast, right? With everything that goes on. And oh, by the way, we're talking a lot about Boone. Oh boy.
Sorry, I was going to turn my phone off and I didn't.
We're talking a lot about Boone, which seeing the Super Nationals, but not everybody has a Super Nationals. So how do you get people to show up, at like a Mandan or Minot, Nodak or Dakota? What do they do? Because they're not, they don't have the Super Nationals. So they have their showcase, they have the Dakota Mod Tour, and that's their opportunity. How do you create those opportunities in a situation that makes either drivers want to show up or gets fans to show up? Not everybody has the same circumstances, especially new promoters, right? They're not just going to come in there and create a Super Nationals type event. It's just impossible. So we have to have a value proposition for them as well.
Right. Well, we bounced around a lot, and we weren't going to make this really long, but with you talking and me talking, it's easy to make a podcast last a long time. Talk about... I always appreciate your input and your perspective on market size. And when we say market size, like how big is the racing industry? That to me is very interesting.
So first thing you're going to have to think about, okay, how are we going to actually slice and dice that total pie? Are we going to include truck and tractor pulling? Are we going to include monster trucks? Are we going to, all of the various things that come into play? But from what I can tell, as a very generic grassroots, including sort of everything that you would see at a county fair or anything of that nature, this is not just dirt track. So it's everything. I've heard people say, we could probably estimate 2.5 to 5 million people that we're touching, pretty closely that we could count as an audience. Really not that big when there's 330 million people in the U.S., right? So
at least,
5 million sounds big. It's not big. And then that doesn't even, that really skews people off. All those people watch on a live stream?
Exactly.
No. I would venture to bet nobody has even come close to touching anything near that. I think that the largest sustained viewership that anybody would have on, let's just stick with dirt track because it's going to have a dirt track audience, is probably in the tens of thousands, sustained people watching, and people who really care about the event, people that are going to sit there and watch for an hour, right? That's what's happening. And somebody else can dispute, and I'd gladly take your analytics if you want to deliver them to me, and tell me that that's not the case. Because it's everything's paywall. It doesn't matter whose service we're talking about, right? We are putting a barrier there. If we're just talking about somebody watching something behind the paywall, I'm guessing that that's what we're talking about. And then to really put some understanding, what does a weekly racetrack get in terms of viewership? On a weekly event, non-special, we're not talking about somebody's event that's out of season, all of those sort of things. Yes, some folks that are doing okay, but have 30 people watching and paying for a broadcast, 30, So it's an extra 30 people in the grandstand. That's why we have that perspective. It's effectively what it is.
Right.
30 more people in the grandstand on up to, there's some tracks, if they're premier tracks, that have the hundreds of people watching. We generally, based on most of our models, unless it's a special event, I'm going to characterize that over and over again. Special events they're called special for a reason. Generally you're staying under that. I think you get some events into the thousands, thousands of people that are watching simultaneously and care about the event.
One of the interesting things that I see, and I want to bring up too, because I've seen the back end of it, is when you broadcast, as far as like what night.
Oh yeah,
also plays a huge role into how many people are watching streaming.
Saturday is a war.
It is. You go to Saturday when in IMCA, for example, if we have 100 racetracks racing on a weekend, let's just say on a weekend, well, that would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights. We probably have 90% of those tracks, maybe 85% of those tracks operating on Saturday nights.
Yeah, and that's Friday all based on their local culture of what people expect, the habit that's been built.
We talked about this in our podcast a couple of weeks ago, like track sizes, and how few racetracks are half mile or more, and how 3/8 mile and less seems to be, you have some really, really what I would call very small racetracks, like fifth mile stuff. You have 3/8 and then you have halves. And they're all pocket. Most of them are in that 3/8 mile. And our nightly stuff is the same thing. Most of them are in that Saturday night. You got a little bit of Friday night, a little bit of Sunday night, and then you have some fair specials or midweek specials, as we reference them, in some parts of the country. But in many parts of the country, they won't touch a midweek special with a 10-feet pole. There's no way we're not doing that, because they know.
Well, and that's actually something that I think it's fairly unique to IMCA. I mean, obviously there's other groups doing it. But I would say midweek racing is, in Iowa, is sort of a thing that doesn't exist in too many other places.
Right.
I've been through these discussions in our discussions for Speed Sport 1 about what content do we have that's midweek. And I'm like, it's all Iowa. It looks like it's all Iowa stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it tends to be,
Yeah. People say, oh, when you race in Vinton there, what Sunday nights? Like, Sunday? You guys race on Sunday? And I'm like, yeah, we race on Sunday. That's unheard of in many states. But those issues also, you've got pricing, you've got the night they're racing, you've got what type of event they're hosting. You've got all these different variables that come into play when it comes to streaming an event. And at the end, how much of those 2.5 to 5 million people in all of motorsports are actually tuning in.
And they have to pay. The pay is the key. So whenever and I wish we didn't have to have that barrier, but the primary reason we have that barrier is at this point in time, we don't have the ability to transition to an ad-supported, sponsor-supported mechanism to make it work, because the numbers are too small. Right. And ultimately, that is the fundamental issue for all the fans out there who are wondering, why can't we just watch this stuff for free? Everything that you watch for free, anywhere that you see it, is always ad-supported. You think about all of the major sports.
Something has to pay the bills.
Somebody is paying it. And, oh, by the way, they're able to get to the millions. And while we would all like to get to the millions, I would love to be in the millions. I would transition in a heartbeat if somebody would pay for it.
You bring up a really interesting topic or discussion. And again, we're going to go into another direction. But, I read a story last week maybe on regional sports.
Oh, Bally, who just went bankrupt.
Yeah, regional sports. People want to watch. Well, I don't have to pay to watch the NFL if I want to turn it on, or I watch my local hockey, whatever it may be. They've got the regional sports. Well, these regional TV stations are going out of business,
right?
Because they're saying somewhat of the streaming model is playing a part of that, or at least a role in it, or it's.
Well, from a cost factor, either they're not charging enough, or they're not able to bring in enough sponsorship revenue. And, by the way, ad dollars are drying up to some degree, because ad dollars have often gone to social media directly. So
correct.
So that problem is pretty big. And the other side that comes into play here, and all of the fans need to understand, well, what are you watching? I was able to watch my kid for free play volleyball. Well, how good was it? Could you hear it? Are people making an active effort at making it better? And that's always been one of my foundational sort of hopes, is that I'm not just trying to get it done. I start with getting it done, and I really want to improve people a lot.
People begin to have expectations the more they watch. And when you watch Super Bowl type productions, obviously the NFL, any professional sports, their level of production is very, very, very good.
Right.
And you go to a local high school, let's just say hypothetically, you want to watch a high school football game. It's not going to be produced like an NFL game. But that doesn't mean that's not what people want. You know what I mean? We're seeing that in racing. The more we stream, the more people want live timing and scoring.
Correct.
The more they want
replays.
The more they want 2 cameras. The more they want all
drones.
these things. And drones, yeah. That's a whole nother subject. But yeah, that level of production is exponentially more expensive.
We start to ratchet up
produce.
rather quickly. And for me, thinking this from a business perspective, my core value when it comes to the weekend, once Friday and Saturday hit, I'm trying to have everybody be consistent and execute. And you start to add some nuance and some complexity to a weekly racing broadcast where we don't have $5 million 53-foot production trailers and teams of 20 people. You're going down a path that can be potentially dangerous. 2 things. One, it just fails, and then the audience doesn't get what they want, or we can't pay the people to produce it. And I think that's sometimes forgotten, that these people, and we have a number of people now that didn't exist. And I gave this example many times at trade shows. 2010, there's probably 50 people who were sort of doing this stuff at local racetracks, or maybe people doing DVD things. I probably touch on myself hundreds, and we have, I don't know, maybe 20 to 30 of those people that it's now their full-time job. We've at least created the economy to do it, but I think some of the fans lose some of that respect for these people that took a huge risk trying to make a business out of this, because they are very passionate. There's passionate, many of them. I always think of Ben Cruckton. Ben Cruckton, he does some IMCA stuff, but also does some WISSOTA stuff.
We all make mistakes.
You had to slide that in there.
Yes, I did.
The guy just pounds the pavement and loves dirt track racing, and has committed his life to doing this sort of stuff and tries to make it better every single day. And it's oftentimes 1 or 2 guys doing these productions and making it better and providing something for the fans, and at least giving the sport an opportunity to move forward. If we don't take these steps and we don't have people in these places, we lose the opportunity altogether. So a lot of these fans really need to be thankful.
And other sports fill the void.
Right, because it's there, right? I mean, that's that back to your regional sports problem. That's why they're battling over this. The teams themselves want some control and want some revenue and want some opportunity to make their product better. But I think the MLB sold most of those rights. I could be wrong. And then the individual team doesn't get the option of how it's managed one way or the other. They're sort of stuck.
Yep.
It would be like that if IMCA said to everybody, "Oh, we own all your broadcast rights,
right,
and we execute them, or nobody executes them."
Which some sanctions do.
Right.
Or tours, however you want to look at it.
Right.
We've been much more flexible from the onset on giving the promoters the freedom to choose what they think is in their best interest for their show, because they are inevitably the person taking the most risk. But we like to think that we have the best solution for that.
That is one thing that when people get about this broadcast rights thing, I've always made the statement of, he who pays the purse ultimately will make these decisions, whether it's in the long term or short term. These guys are taking the biggest risk. If you go and look, and I ask promoters this when I have a discussion, correct me if I'm wrong. If you look at the P&L for a race, what is the biggest number on that P&L? Pretty sure it's the purse.
Yeah, we as a sanction, we as racers, we as sponsors who are building, or anybody who's building components for race cars, anybody in the industry, the buck stops with the promoter. When the promoters don't exist, and I think we learned this a little bit in 2020, when the promoters don't exist and the races don't happen, I don't have events to sanction. Hoosier doesn't have tires to sell people to.
Correct.
I mean, it's just across the board. So the promoter is very, 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 very key. So from the onset for us, from a streaming standpoint, of trying to help or assist our racetracks and
cater to their needs.
Yeah, to better service their needs and keep their facility solvent, open. Let them make some of those decisions, and we definitely not throw up something that, again, is maybe a little bit not in their best interests or in everybody's interests with a membership that doesn't necessarily pay them potentially fairly.
Right. And that's hard. It's just a hard thing to balance. And we'll keep working at it.
Yeah.
If that opportunity does come up, I mean, maybe you've got you got on your Super Nationals light. Maybe we're going to get a Bud Light sponsor or a Busch Light sponsor, and they'll pay for the entire year.
I've told you behind the scenes, and we've talked about this before. I still think the UFC,
right.
The UFC, the way they do their pay-per-views, the way they get their content out. I can watch some stuff for free.
Right.
I can watch some free fights. I can watch the pre-card. I can watch some of that stuff for free. But if I want to watch Conor McGregor fight, I ain't going to get that on a subscription.
No. And it's going to be at a premium.
And you even got guys like Conor McGregor, for example, that he's smart enough to do what?
Yeah, he gets paid off of those
His
subs.
contract is actually written to get the pay-per-view money now.
Right.
The big guys, and we're not to that level, and I don't even think anybody in dirt track racing is to that level, and I don't think has that influence of somebody of that magnitude. The
only we talk about that's the only person that really scratches the surface is Cletus McFarland. That's not dirt track, but
right.
He's motorsports.
Yeah,
and the numbers I hear are a million plus is what I hear in the world of subs.
But a lot of these streaming services aren't necessarily either paying the racers anything. They're paying the promoters,
right?
But they're paying the purse. So in a way that they are somewhat.
That's a viability factor.
Funding that, but not like we're doing where we're taking a percentage. Again, on our replay subscription, which is not live, and again, that's a whole nother subject, replay versus live.
Right.
Live is where it's at. That's where everybody seems to be is live. In any sporting venue, it's live. That's where they focus. But if you want to watch it tape delay or the next day or on Sports Center or 3 hours later, whatever it may be, we have the replay version of that is what I call it. And it's priced differently.
Well, and we
because it's not live.
That is specified to try to capture as much of the IMCA market as we can, and help finance the concerns of the promoter. That's why IMCA is able to effectively fund equipment and make some of those purchases. Is we're using that as a mechanism with the long term.
Can you say that again so everybody can hear this? So I don't take all the streaming money and put it in my pocket?
You couldn't. I mean, this is the market side. Yeah, I wouldn't let you.
And we actually use the streaming revenue to do what?
To purchase equipment so that it funds what's happening at the racetrack.
To give to who?
The promoters.
Wow. Imagine that.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, and I mean, it is good to emphasize that, and it wasn't, necessarily something that we were striking out to do here.
No.
But I think it is a strong point and of understanding that this is something, and back to what you're saying, this is a new spot, and I'm probably the one who's, jamming in there. Here's your prior fundamental values that are based on creating rules, and you don't really have this touch point of the fan.
Yeah, now all of a sudden I'm providing streaming equipment to racetracks.
Right. But it's the right thing to do because we need this media element. It helps the promoters be successful, and in many different ways. One, helps them with media. Two, revenue source that helps pay purses, whether people want to believe it or not. Correct. If it's coming in there,
it does that. It also gets the racers more exposure.
Correct.
It gets the sponsors to the racers more exposure.
Correct.
I mean, everything. It's all connected. It's hard to really break one of these subjects or out of this system and not expect it to have a problem.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the good things we've tried to constantly do here for many years now, at least in the last 3 or 4, and that is to try to make sure we hit marks that matter to everybody associated with the sport.
And it's sustainable.
Correct.
We've got a lot of folks out in our market that like to do one-shot sort of deals, gimmicky folks who just like to get people excited for one show. I want everybody to be excited as much as possible for all of our shows. And to me, that's a long-term lift of building sustainable processes. Now is when I sound like the engineer. If you don't do it, though, it's just like if you don't put money in the savings account, and you don't earn interest, it doesn't compound over time. And so you have to do these. You got to set aside a little bit of money, and that's what we're doing that effectively for the promoters over time. They don't see it, but behind the scenes, I'm buying cameras when I see them cheap on eBay. I'm buying equipment that I know will work and facilitate at their facilities, and then we're making sure it's prepared. Nate's doing the hard work, getting tired of hearing me tell him we got to ship out equipment. But these things are what we're doing for the racetrack, so that then they have this other viable source of revenue, so that racing at IMCA on a weekly basis can maintain some health, right? That's the goal.
Correct.
Some people miss that. Oh, you're just trying to make money.
I mean,
guess what? It's America. We all should be trying, as businesses, that is part of it, right? That is part of it, and that's back to the fans. We're not trying to hose the fans. We want the fans to have the best product we possibly can, given the industry in a broad way.
And you know, again, when it back to pricing, you know, how do we price that? We from the onset kind of say, well, what's it cost to get in the pits? What's it cost to get in the grandstands? You know, and generally speaking, we've recommended that racetracks price their stream a pit pass price. That's generally, and that's kind of how we've handled the Super Nationals. To be quite honest, people say, how do you come up with the pricing? That's how. It's what it costs to be there. If you wanted my honest opinion, if you're providing me, or if we're providing the race fan a convenience to stay home and sit on their couch and use their own bathroom and make their own food and do their own thing and be on their own schedule, whatever, they should pay more. That's just my opinion. They should pay more than what the people who are there are paying, because again, you're creating a convenience factor. However, that's not how a lot of people think.
Well, that's the mindset from the Netflixes of the world.
Correct. But for $9.99, I should be able to watch every single race in the world.
Right. And what they're doing is they're drawing a comparison that, unfortunately, I wish it were valid, but it's just a market size and a volume issue that we don't have that reach. I mean, they have 200 plus million, subscribers. And I always thought it was interesting, but you're drawing up the pricing. People are losing their mind over Netflix going from like $9.99
to $14.99 or $13.99.
I could never understood why they just didn't price it at $19.99 to start off with.
My YouTube TV, I'm kind of a tightwad. I have YouTube TV at my house. Went from like $69.95 to $72.95 or something like that. And they just said, the way they pitched it, I just read it and I just laughed. I'm just thinking, there's got to be thousands upon thousands of people that are pissed off now that they have to pay $3 more for YouTube TV. Right. And I look at that and I'm going, I just thought it was interesting how they solicited it, for 10 years, this has been priced this way, and stuff like that.
But we price based on what our market can manage to execute the entire process. You need to be able to pay the people that are there. If they're not there and they don't get paid, and by the way, you want a better and better show all the time, which means
drones are expensive.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, all of these things come into factor. And back to some of the weekly shows, you're getting 30 to 40 people watching. You guys can go and do the math. If it's between 20 and 25 bucks, and this guy's a subcontractor that's coming out there, and there's 30 people watching, we start to dwindle away pretty quickly how much money's available to them. They're working tough days. They're expected to do stuff. This is a specialty sort of thing. And if you want them to be good, you have to expect to pay them something. Sure. I think that is, for me, that's, I get all of those. Yeah, we want it free. It helped grow the sport. Maybe I'll get there someday. But I have to, currently with what we're doing, we at least have to raise the bar to the place where we can possibly get there. And so the fans, while we recognize the criticism, I wish it could be free. It just can't be. Not yet.
No. We have blown through our 20-minute or 30-minute.
This is going to be 20? Oh, geez. Oh, sorry. They didn't hear me getting barked at by Nate for doing something technically wrong.
Shame on you. He has never told me to do that. Well, again, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things, but I think this has been a very informative, at least transparent discussion on streaming, on how we view it at IMCA, the relationship we have with our platform, and the relationship we have with our promoters and our racers, our sponsors, our race fans. People may not like that that's the position that we take necessarily, but there's justification for it, at the end of the day. And I've told you this many times, because I'll say this: streaming and some of the stress that streaming events has put on me, or this sanction, has been very high, to the point where I'm like, I don't give a shit. I don't need streaming. This place was in business well before streaming, and I think this place would be in business well after streaming. However, I think that all the things we've talked about and the things that we're trying to accomplish, at the end of the day, we're like Ben. We are trying to make racing better. Right. We are trying to expose our racers, and everybody, to other people, to get that market, to get that number we've talked about, to at the very least sustain it, or at optimally we're gonna make it better. So we make new race fans, we make new racers. Our marketing of our events is creating a positive atmosphere, and something that in a way that wasn't available 10 years ago by any means. So,
right. And I think that's what you've given the opportunity. Most of your criticism came, in the 2020s and the 2021s. And I think that you've seen, as we've sustained and developed this, we keep on incrementally adding value. We bring up, doing more of this marketing. And, we've talked about Garrett and Mr. TikTok, whatever they call him. Is that right, Mr. TikTok?
I just call him Garrett.
Yeah, I think a great example of, and I sometimes don't take a step back. I'm not an award guy. I'm not a guy who really cares about.
Me neither.
It just has never been me. But if you go back and look sort of how Florida fired off from a technical media perspective, and you see what Byron and Garrett were doing, and you start to see that these pieces fall together over time with consistency and with developed approaches. And that happened there. The Hunt the Front guys obviously helped quite a bit too, but
they're very skilled in what they do. They're very technical, but they're also very creative,
Right.
and usually people that are like that, they're hard to find. They're hard to retain. They're hard to just keep doing that. And so to have guys like Byron and Garrett and that are doing those kinds of things, I think, again, it's creating a much better product at the end of the day for our race fans to consume.
And I think about it, that is probably my primary job, is creating an environment where those people can function at the top level, and that they don't feel like they're being pulled in different directions. That's my day-to-day, is I think about that nonstop. Yep. So I don't get to be creative all that much, but as long as they get to do and operate with it at the level they need to, that helps us all.
Yep.
All right, you can kill it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go. We are well over time. Plus, it's my daughter's 12th birthday today, so I have to tell my daughter. Oh, there it is. See, this is my "you better get home" call, because we have to go to do birthday things. So, but again, I want to thank you for all you've done for IMCA, for sure, and you make IMCA a better association, the way you push us to make our product and expose our product to people. So I guess I definitely have to thank you. It's been an interesting relationship over the last 20 so years or so.
Yeah, it's been longer than the streaming stuff.
And nobody has actually lived in my house more than me and my wife and my family than you, which is really weird if you think about how I said that.
We're basically roommates at times.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of.
Well, people in the industry, the funniest one I have, and Kennedy will love being talked about on her birthday.
I'm 50. I don't need a roommate, but I got one.
The whole prank thing between your daughter as a separate life, it was discussed at RPM, and Joe Skotnicki was like, "Oh yeah, we need to incorporate pranking into RPM somehow, some way." And I explained the toothpaste prank.
That was a good one. I don't know how she come up with that. She probably Googled it, or found on YouTube or something like that, where she took one of my barbecue syringes, one of my injection syringes for putting like apple juice in a pork butt, and filled it full of mayonnaise and put it in your toothpaste. which I still laugh. I'm like, ooh, how did you not know that there was mayonnaise in your?
But it's fun this time of year.
Toothpaste.
It's, we're right at the beginning of the season. I come out now and before Super Nationals, and I can expect a prank war every time.
I'm just thankful she has never done that to me. So
I'm her main target.
you're an easy target. Well, again, I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody for listening. Hopefully we've answered some questions that people find interesting.
Right. I hope so.
Shown some transparency that I think that people always want to see these days. So again, I want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to sit down with me and
thank you
and talk.
I'm always happy to do it. We look forward to bringing more to IMCA and IMCA TV. It's a fun project.
Till our next podcast, I guess we'll close out for now and see you down the road.
Thanks, everybody.